Okay.
Well, let's go ahead and get started. I have 3:02, and thanks everybody for joining us today. Again, April 9th, Thursday, April 9th. We appreciate y'all joining us. We've been doing this for a few weeks now, and so I think everybody's getting to be pros at tuning into our Zoom calls. Just a reminder, you can follow us at the Chamber on social media, on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, at GSO Chamber. That's at GSO Chamber for the latest information. We'll also be sending out a daily email to our members with a recording of the call and any relevant links that we feel you all need to know about. So be on the lookout this afternoon for that email. If you're not a member and you're on the call, welcome. We're glad you're here. All of the links to those resources, all of the recordings of the call, they're all archived at greensboro.org/COVID-19. Greensboro.org/COVID-19. Megan Mabry told us this morning that our website traffic is way up. We appreciate that. That is why we exist as a Chamber of Commerce, to connect our members, our business community, our community in general, to answers to questions, to other resources, to other businesses, other people, to a lot of help that's available out there in the community. And so please do continue to visit greensboro.org/COVID-19. A couple of commercials here before we get started. One is, and I think the mayor would echo this: while you're home, fill out those census forms. We're making some really good progress on that. We don't want to lose the momentum, and certainly given what the census is used for, whether that be representation at a federal level, whether that means federal dollars that are coming to our community, we need you all to fill out those census forms. So please do that. A second commercial: our friends at Downtown Greensboro Inc. have started a fundraiser. They're partnering with downtown restaurants to provide meals for healthcare workers at Cone Health. We'll put the link in the chat, and it's on our social media. It'll be in our post-call email. It's a great way to give back to both our local small businesses and to the workers on the front lines at the same time. So a giant win-win there. We hope that you will consider that going forward. Today we are honored and blessed to have Mayor Nancy Vaughan with us. She was raised in Connecticut and attended Fairfield University in Fairfield, Connecticut. She represented the Greensboro City Council District 4 from 1997 to 2001. In 2009, she was elected as an at-large representative, and has served in that role until her 2013 election as the mayor of Greensboro. She's known for her grassroots organization and extensive work building stronger neighborhoods, with an emphasis, and this is what we love, an emphasis on economic development for our lives at the Chamber and also public safety. And Mayor, let me start off first of all by saying thank you. I know you have worked absolutely tirelessly since the start of this COVID-19 pandemic to protect the city, to protect its citizens. And you and I have had several phone calls, and I know you've got to be getting tired, but you don't show it, and we appreciate that. And thank you to you. Thank you to your staff. Every time there's some crisis that befalls our community, whether that be a tornado, whether that be this and COVID-19, whatever it is, you all can be counted on to do your very best and really to shine in the face of adversity. So thank you for that. While we get started, just give us 3 or 4 minutes on where are we as a community with COVID-19, with Greensboro. What is kind of the state of the city of Greensboro right now in the face of this unseen adversary that we're facing?
Thank you. I appreciate. We certainly are in a place we never anticipated. I thought 2020 was going to be a fabulous year. We thought March was going to be an amazing year, kicking off with the ACC women's basketball tournament, and the men going to the Stephen Tanger Performing Arts Center, and then the NCAA first 2 rounds of the men's basketball tournament. Everything looked like it was going to be seamless. It was going to be wonderful for our local businesses. Everybody was really doing their jobs, and everyone was going to benefit from it. And then lo and behold, we started hearing a little bit about this virus that was happening in other parts of the world. I had no idea how it was going to affect us. And then, lo and behold, here it is, and everything has changed, a mere 5 weeks later. I think we are fortunate that we have a top-notch staff who really began to prepare for what was going to hit the city of Greensboro and Guilford County. And we're fortunate that we do have a top-notch staff and had started mobilizing before it hit our local headlines and had started putting things into place. And we do have personnel who are always ready and willing to go the extra mile for us. And that is so important, whether they are first responders or water resources, parks and recreation, communications. I mean, every single department. We say that all the time, and it is absolutely true. I think we have the best municipal staff bar anyone, and bar anywhere, and that is so important. We say it time and time again, but it really is worth repeating. So we've made arrangements to do everything that we can possibly do for the health and well-being of the people of Greensboro and Guilford County, and those arrangements are ongoing. I want to say that the local business community has really stepped up, and the first people who were affected by this virus really were our small businesses, and that was the local hospitality business, the ones who were really going to be impacted the best by all of the rollouts of the hospitality that was going to happen in March. They were the first ones to feel the bite of this virus. And when I started calling around to tell them that they might have to close, with every single restaurant owner that I spoke to said, we understand. We know what's going to happen. We understand. And they weren't bitter. They were really leaders and said, we're going to get through this. We're going to come back. And the phone calls that I had with them were really, really amazing. And it was the hope, and they knew that we were going to come through this stronger. And it really is on their backs that this disease has fallen on us. And the first business that closed were these local mom and pops, and those are the ones that we really need to shore up. And on the city's website, we have a lot of resources for our local businesses that they can turn to. And I will say that individually, I'm still going out to eat every night, and I like to use the hashtag Leave a Big Tip. And I hope that we are all still looking at local restaurants, mom and pops that we can get carry out from. There are some websites that you can look at on Facebook and on Twitter. If you don't know where to go, there are certainly lots of opportunities. There are a few websites, Brent, you mentioned earlier about our healthcare workers that are providing meals for lunch and dinner at Cone and other places, which I think are real important. But we do have to shore up our local businesses while we're waiting for some of the state and federal government funds to come through. I am the chair of our Metro Mayors organizations, and I'm thankful for that because we get to talk probably twice a week on what's going on in our different communities. And it's good because we know we're not alone. What's happening in Greensboro is the same thing that's happening in Raleigh and Charlotte and all of the different municipalities. And we are, as we're we are as a state, we're all going to get through this. And I think because our economies were so strong, that on the back end, I like to think it's going to be like a defibrillator, and that our economies are going to jump start. We're going to a couple of months. We are going to have to see that our local businesses have some extra support. So, it's important that we continue to practice this social distancing. I'm a little concerned that there's some rumbling that we need to jumpstart a little too soon. When you read a lot of the reports, they say it's important that we continue the social distancing. And
Right.
I think that's one thing that's very important.
Right. Madam Mayor, I was talking to another group the other day, and you mentioned at the top of the call, or top of your comments, that here we were poised to have this great 2 or 3 week run in Greensboro, almost unprecedented, of basketball and performing arts and this and that. And I, the way I thought about it, looking back, how fortunate we were that didn't happen, given looking to our neighbors in New Orleans who had a Mardi Gras celebration and are now a hotspot for COVID-19. So imagine if we hadn't pulled the plug, how much different and how much more of a concerning situation we would be in locally if we hadn't taken those actions.
Well, and the ACC saw how the community rallied around that event, and how gracious we were when the whole thing imploded, and they're going to remember that. We still have all of those assets. Tanger is still open. The events that got canceled will come back. They will reschedule. We still have those assets. We'll be able to use them. So, I think, we'll be able to use these things in the future. They didn't go away. We still have great hotels. We still have wonderful restaurants. These are all things that we'll be able to leverage in a few months from now.
And I think the wonderful thing you just mentioned is everybody's out there trying to help in some way or another. So you mentioned, there are places to get information on local restaurants. We've got it on our webpage, and Holly will list that in chat for everybody. I know DGI has it on their webpage. I've seen the Facebook page. And you've got it. I mean, there are no lack of resources to find local restaurants that are up and operating if you want to get a meal. And to your point, I would encourage that tremendously. There's resources out there to help these small businesses get connected with the resources that the federal government's putting out there. And so, there are a lot of resources out there. Talk to us a little bit about what you're seeing that may change in the next week or two. We started to hear the governor talk yesterday a little bit more about, hey, the social distancing is working, but we may have to ratchet it up a little bit. What are you hearing maybe coming down the pike in terms of some enhanced social distancing?
Well, today at 4:00 in his press conference, he is going to talk about guidelines, restrictions for the big box stores and groceries, on the maximum capacity and protections for those workers. The city of Greensboro, we did put out guidelines last week through our business office on how we would like the big box retailers to monitor behavior, but it didn't really catch much ground. But the governor will actually put restrictions in place, and those will probably be long-term restrictions, and I think they're important. But not everybody should panic and run out. It's not going to be like people when there's a storm coming in where they're going to have to go out and buy bread or milk. We've got plenty of things on the shelf, but this will be where people just need to modify their behavior. And these will be guidelines across the entire state. I was on a conference call with the Metro Mayors, with our Secretary of Agriculture, and he said there's plenty of food. People shouldn't worry about food capacity at this point. The food that was intended for restaurants is now being redirected to grocery stores. So there's plenty of food distribution, that we shouldn't be worried about food capacity. So people shouldn't be overwhelming grocery stores at this point. So that's a something you'll hear in the governor's press conference at 4 o'clock. And then, over the next couple of weeks, he will be rolling out other things that will happen statewide. Before the governor instituted his stay-at-home order, Mecklenburg was the first municipality, the first that came out with their stay-at-home order. And these were stay-at-home orders that the metro mayors had started working on. It was Mecklenburg, then Buncombe, Durham City, then Guilford County. What shape that they'll be in over the next couple of weeks, whether or not we will go under the state order, depends on what the state order looks like and how social distancing looks like at the state level, because we know, based on talking with Terry Aiken at Moses Cone and his epidemiologists, that's utmost important when it comes to keeping that curve bent. That if we want to keep people out of the hospital and for the health and well-being of our communities and communities across the state, that we have to keep people away from each other. And that is the most important thing that we can do right now. And as community leaders, everybody who is on this call right now, that is really the most important message that you can send. And that is that we really have to take this seriously. If we want to keep our workers healthy, then people have to take the stay-at-home message seriously, that social distancing is important.
Mayor,
that is why we've had the success at keeping people out of the hospitals. That is why we've had the success of keeping the COVID-19 cases below what people expected. It's not because they were wrong, it's because of the social distancing practices that were put in place by the local orders.
The good news is we're being very successful at that, and starting to see those curves flatten. I remember it was right around the time of the ACC tournament that I first heard the term "flatten the curve," and I think we're all experts at flattening the curve now. Back then, nobody had any idea what we were talking about. Now we see it every day. Everybody follows that curve and watches it flatten, hopefully. Your stay-at-home order expires April 16th. Is that correct, Mayor?
Yeah.
The county's does?
Yes.
And so take us through,
Yes,
you'll be
it does.
evaluating. Go ahead.
So what we said was that we would review it on the 16th, and at that point, it could either be renewed, or if it's not renewed, it could be renewed with modifications, or if it's not renewed, then it would just go under the governor's order. And it's actually the person who will have the biggest amount of input would be the Guilford County Health Director and Emergency Management. And the health director, God love her, she's an interim health director, and she was just appointed on March 1st. So somebody who really went into the frying pan really fast, and that's Dr. Julia Vaughan. And, her recommendations will carry an awful lot of weight. And she's working closely with the healthcare providers in our community and the epidemiologists. So, what they say will be very important, I think. And it's not just the city of Greensboro, it's the city of High Point, any other municipalities. It is a Guilford County-wide stay-at-home order.
And I remember when that was first being considered, there was some talk of there being multiple orders within Guilford County. Talk to us a little bit about the teamwork that you're seeing between the county, High Point, Greensboro. How is that working out for everyone at this point?
I'm really grateful to the county commissioners. Initially, I don't think they were interested in a county-wide stay-at-home order, and the city of Greensboro was, I think, based on the work through the Metro Mayor's organization, and Jay Wagner in High Point was as well. And then as we started talking with our county commissioners, and I think as they started talking with their health director, they felt that it should be a county-wide order. So I'm very grateful to their leadership and the way that they spoke with their health department, that they felt that it should be a county-wide ordinance. And so at that point, they really stepped up and worked on the ordinance, and they have been very supportive of it as it's gone on.
Mayor, what's keeping you up at night these days? I know there's a lot on your mind. What are the 2 or 3 things that are keeping you up at night as we go through this? Or does it change? Does it change day by day, hour by hour? Tell us, give us a little bit of a window into what's going on in your world that worries you at this point.
Well, what worries me are the local businesses, getting them back in businesses, the ones that have closed. Certainly the restaurants, the hair salons, nail salons, barbershops, the fitness studios, all the small businesses that closed, making sure that they're going to be able to come back. That's one thing. All of the people who were on, the hourly wage workers who were living paycheck to paycheck before, that are going to have trouble making their rent. Evictions were put on hold and utility payments were put on hold, but they're still accruing. So come June 1st, they were put on hold till June 1st, but that doesn't mean that that they were forgiven. So we know that that's an issue. Obviously, the homeless population, that getting people into housing, and not just housing during the virus, but permanent housing, has been an issue, but this has really shown a spotlight on it. So, these are all really big issues that should be 365-day-a-year issues, but this has just amplified it more. So those are some of the issues that keep me up, but there are a whole host of other things.
Talk to us about how often you're in touch with the medical community. You mentioned the county's health director. Is that your primary contact, or do you talk with the folks at the hospital on a regular basis? What stats and what information are you getting regularly in terms of the health status of the community?
I speak to people at the hospital multiple times a day. And Dr. Vaughan, we get an email from the health department on a daily basis, but I speak to people at Cone multiple times a day. And they are really my touch point on what's going on at the hospital, and obviously capacity, but what is going on through the minds of the epidemiologists over there, and of course Terry Aiken, what is he seeing? What about his peers at the other hospitals associations throughout the state? Though that's really what keeps me up at night. When we hear about reports that come out, these are the boots on the ground people. When we hear reports that come out that are at the 30,000 foot level or the 50,000 foot level, well, how does that comport with what's actually going on in our community? When people start talking about, well, it's really not that bad. then I go to the boots on the ground people. Well, does this equal with what you're seeing? So, Terry might wish that I lose his phone number sometimes.
I think he'll take your call at any time. A couple of questions, Madam Mayor, that are coming up on our group chat. One person wanted to and you touched a little bit on it. Maybe you could give a little bit more color around services for people experiencing homelessness right now.
So, the city has been working really hard to make sure that we have shelter in place. And we have been working with the county. And I know that High Point also has been working hard. We have, obviously, we have the IRC, the YWCA, and the Urban Ministry. We set up a temporary shelter at the Sportsplex, which is a pretty large shelter where we had over 100 beds set up, and they were set up 6 feet apart. We, through the IRC, we were able to put up people that were older, over 60, in temporary housing in a hotel, since they were considered a vulnerable population. Been providing 3 meals a day. There were many people in tents, and we're doing our best to get them out of tents right now, and working with the county commissioners on that. They are still in tents right now, but we want to get them into a shelter. Through the CARES Act, we are able to get people who are waiting for tests into a hotel where they can quarantine. And I believe the governor announced that yesterday. So they can self-quarantine in a local hotel while they wait for results to come back. That really, they need to be in a hotel, not just waiting for results, but for long-term. We can't have people living in tents, or, once the virus gets into any community, but in any congregate care community, whether it's in a shelter or in a tent community, we see what's happening in rest homes, that once it gets into a rest home, that it takes off like wildfire. And that is a concern on 2 levels. I mean, you don't want people just living in shelters. And you don't want people living in shelters when something like this can infect them and make a large population sick. And then you also have to worry about the employees in that shelter. Again, that is something that should be on our minds 365 days a year, not just when there is this pandemic. So the city actually started working on this well in advance before it made headlines. And that, I think, is something that we could all be proud of, that they worked on it before it hit social media, before it hit the News and Record or anybody else, that the city had been working on plans before the Sportsplex came out. They looked at numerous places where we could put people, get them inside. And so it's not a perfect solution, but we're trying to get people sheltered and fed and have access to transportation and medical care.
And did I hear this correctly? I'd heard some reports of that there are more homeless arriving in Greensboro on a regular basis, even in the midst of this?
There have been some. I don't know exactly what that number is. I do know that there was a family who, in speaking with Michelle Kennedy, Councilwoman Michelle Kennedy, and of course she's executive director of the IRC, she did tell me of a family who had just relocated from New York. He had a job. He was in Greensboro, and when he got here, the company he was to work for laid him off because the company closed. They went right into quarantine in a hotel. I do know anecdotally that there are people coming here. I don't know what that number is. I don't believe it is a huge number, but I have heard that there are people in Greensboro who are not native to Greensboro.
Gotcha. Well, and I, to your point, I think you all have done a fantastic job planning and preparing for that particular community that sometimes goes overlooked. An incredible effort. What gives you hope, or what do you? Go ahead. I'm sorry, man.
On the flip side to that, one thing that we do, and we always try to do that through the IRC and others, if there are people in our homeless community that have family and friends in other states, and we can send them, I mean, if we can actually talk to somebody on the other side of the phone, and they will take their loved one in that other community, also send people to other places if we can verify that the person on the other end of the phone actually will take responsibility for them. So we will also send people to other places, but we will only do that if we verify that they have a place to go.
That's very good.
We send people, we will put people on a bus and send them somewhere else.
So I was kind of the final wrap up question of my portion of this. If you have some additional questions, feel free to put them in chat. I'm seeing a lot of questions on that chat about unemployment, and I see Chris Wilson is doing a good job of replying to those. We're getting some real technical questions, Mayor, on unemployment that are difficult for us to answer because the city nor the chamber is in charge of that. But Holly, if you could put up maybe some of the contacts, and again, going to that greensboro.org/COVID-19 has some of those resources that you can go to maybe get a few of those answers. Again, a fluid situation that everybody's working with at this point. When will that $600 kick in from the federal government? How far in terms of back pay will I get? Considering it's taken me a while to get through and get enrolled in the unemployment system. That sort of thing. So thank you, Holly, for putting that up. I guess kind of my final kind of wrap up question as we head into a big weekend for with Good Friday and Easter and everything that comes with a beautiful spring weekend like we're about to experience. What gives you hope? What keeps you going in terms of some good things that you see within the community going forward?
When I, and Brent, you can attest to this, when we see companies changing the way they do business, when they reorganize themselves so they can make masks, when they can make gowns, when they do things differently so they can help our healthcare workers, when we see neighbors helping neighbors, when we know that we have the assets, when we look back to where we were 6 weeks ago, we've been tested before. We're going to get through this. We know who we are. We're going to be okay. We're in a lot better place than a lot of communities are. We're going to get through it. We have to remember what we're made of. When we read the stories in the News and Record, and we read great stories on social media of what companies are willing to do to help people who are in trouble, to help our healthcare workers, that's what we're made of. We're made of, ingenuity and kindness and good. And when we know the assets that we had, what our February was like, what our March is like, that's what Greensboro is. Nobody's going to beat us. We're going to be okay.
Mm-hmm. I agree. We've got so many examples of that, and it's funny that the businesses are doing it, and we've had some folks say, do we talk to the media, and some of them have been featured in the media. You've seen a lot of these great stories in the media about these companies that are turning on a dime and doing things. A lot of them just don't even want the recognition. They just, hey, listen. We appreciate it, and we appreciate the praise that you all are bringing to us, but This is what our company is all about. This is what our community is all about. We don't need that recognition. We don't need it. Let's focus on things that are more important in terms of seeing needs out there and meeting those needs. And everybody seems focused on that. And I think it's a reflection on the community, but Mayor, it's also a reflection on your leadership in leading that community and the way you've stepped up to the plate here once again to make sure that all of the needs of the community are being met, and where they're not being met, where there's a gap, finding a way to fill that gap. And so thank you for that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that, but we've just got a great team in place, and this is a great city, and we just need to remember that.
Is there anything we can do for you as a chamber, as a business community? Is there anything that you see that, hey, y'all need to step in and fill that void? Anything at this point?
I think it's these companies who have reinvented themselves and are going the extra mile, and I think everybody is touting the local businesses. We need to remember that when everybody is up and running again, that we need to, why it's important to focus on ourselves and our local businesses, and to really appreciate why Greensboro is unique, and that we need to lift ourselves up and lift our neighbors up, and we need to remember that all year long, and help us get ourselves back to where we need to be as a community. So before we go to order something online, think, can you buy it here locally? And
That's right.
It means taking a walk down the street to buy it, or getting in your car to buy it somewhere. Before you go to order something online, see if you can buy it here locally.
That's right. That's right. I tell a story. A few years ago, I've got a left-hander, and he wanted to play catcher on his baseball team, and finding a left-handed catcher's mitt in a sports store is not an easy task. And so I went online and thought to myself, probably if I walk into one of these local sporting goods stores, they can order it just as easy as I can on Amazon and probably get it just as quickly.
Yeah.
So we will need to retrain our brains a little bit once this is over to make sure that we're taking care of our local businesses.
Yeah.
Well, Mayor, we're at 40 minutes in. You have been very generous with your time. Thank you so much for joining us today. Again, can't thank you enough. We know I heard Dr. Fauci the other day say we're not quite at halftime of this, and so we know we've got a ways to go. We know that you'll be with us there every step of the way, and we'd love to have you back, perhaps as we continue down this path, and as there are some changes that you may need to address. Who knows what those are, again, because they change hour by hour, day by day. But thank you for joining us. This is our last call of the week. Of course, we've been doing these, I think, for about 4 weeks now. So our last call of the week, because tomorrow is Good Friday. We're taking Good Friday off. I know the city's taking Good Friday off, and so we're going to be back next week. As I said yesterday, starting next week, we're going to be switching up the topics and hosts. I think we've successfully gotten through what I tell people is kind of the shock and awe of this process. Now I'm going to have to go into the stay at home and make the best of things for another few weeks, and then eventually we'll get to that recovery phase, and that'll be an important one as well. So starting next week, we're going to be switching up the topics and the hosts of our daily action calls. They'll still be at 3:00 every day, but we'll have a different host and a different theme from our staff at the Greensboro Chamber. Like you, Mayor, I've got an incredibly good and creative staff, and we want to make sure that Action Greensboro and Launch Greensboro and our membership team and everybody is highlighted. So every day we'll have a different host and a different theme. Check your email. If you're not a member, you can check the website for our full schedule for the next week. We're really excited about these topics. We may have a little bit of fun along the way too, which will be great, and I think welcomed by a number of folks. As we can shelter at home and still have a little fun along the way as well, and learn some things as well. If there are important topics, if there's a a new phase of federal relief that is enacted, if there's something along the unemployment lines that we need to bring to you, we will certainly bring those topics to you. But next week we'll start a whole new round of these calls. Again, tune in at 3:00 every afternoon. So I hope that that as we sign off today here, that everybody has a wonderful spring weekend, has a wonderful Passover, has a wonderful Easter, a lot of great opportunities for us to enjoy the outdoors at a safe and social distance, right? So I would encourage everybody to stay at home for the most part, but certainly stay safe and stay well. Mayor, again, thank you for joining us today, and we'll look forward to talking to everybody again at 3 p.m. on Monday.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Have a wonderful weekend, everyone. We'll talk to everybody on Monday. Take care.